So the portion this week is Parashat Emor. It begins with chapter 21 of Leviticus, page 717. 717. Parashat Emor.
No.
Never taught this.
Well, you
Yeah.
pick it up after a while, but
Hey, I've been trying to figure this for 7 years.
well,
He's a slow learner.
certain things, I guess, you have a block. Okay,
Um,
so we're still in the holiness code, which began back in Apremot. The book of the Vayikra is mainly a product of the priestly code, but there is a section in the middle which is designated as a separate document called the Holiness Code. And of course, Kedoshim is in the center of that. We are to be holy. This parasha deals with holiness of person and holiness of time. I'm sure you all are familiar with my teacher, Abraham Joshua Heschel's book on Shabbat, in which he writes about Shabbat and the importance of time in Judaism. I would like to tell the story. I don't think I've told it here. Maybe I have. Many years ago, when I was serving as the rabbi of the West Temple, I got a call from the Cleveland Police Department. They were awarding special medals to particular policemen who had shown extraordinary bravery, and they wanted me to bless the medal. And I said, in Judaism, we really don't bless things. We bless time.
people, no?
Well, God blesses the people. We convey that blessing. Yes, but it's God who's blessing. But basically, we're holiness of time, not so much anyhow. So I said, if you'd send me the list of the policemen who are being honored, we would like to honor them and bless them in our service. You heard from them? No, I didn't either. Okay. I recall one trip.
Today is the first day I can write.
Yes, it must have been 1958 when I was in Rome, and my father at the time had a Catholic secretary, and he asked me to get a rosary at the Vatican. So I bought a rosary, and the person selling it to me said, "Would you like it blessed?" I said, "Sure." Well, go down to such and such a place, and the priest will bless you. So I had this package. He didn't even open it up, he just blessed it. So he could have, I don't know what it could have been. But but he didn't know what was inside. It's okay, anyhow.
Did you get a certificate?
We bless
Yeah.
time. We make time holy. Things are not holy. People say, "Did you say the blessing over wine?" No, there is no. It's Borei Priagav is a blessing over wine. But what are we doing in Kiddush? We're not blessing the wine. We are Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we are blessing this. We are marking this time is holy. That's what Kiddush is all about. It's not the wine. You spill the wine, clean it up. It's not like the priest spilled the communion. That's terrible. That's really a great sin because it's the blood of Jesus. You don't fool around with that. But wine is wine. Coffee is coffee, bread is bread. We don't let the bread. It's the meal, and it's God giving us food. The bread remains bread, spills on the floor, pick it up.
Yeah.
The rabbi is not holy, sorry. When I was ordained, I was not given that didn't happen.
You know, it's interesting, you were at the cathedral in Baltimore once, and they were showing us the wine and the leftover host and the wine and all. And I had to put, and they were showing us, I forgot what, there's some gadget that they keep it in.
Yeah.
So I asked him, what do you do with the leftover host and the wine? He said, well, we save it and we bring it to the sick people later on in the weeks. I mean, my God, the food's been out and you're keeping it and bringing it over. I mean, it's whatever was left over. It was,
It's a very, I mean, when I was visiting patients in the hospital, you know, the priest would come and, it was usually not the priest, it was a lay person,
yeah.
deacon or whatever, who was, bringing, the communion, to the patient. In many ways, I was jealous. Cause I didn't have anything to give them. I did have a blessing, but, we don't, one of the bad sides of that is we have nothing tangible, nothing physical. You come to the synagogue.
We have a golden calf.
Yeah, but we talk about the sacrifice, right? We talk about what went on in the temple. But we don't do anything.
We have hit it afterwards.
Yeah, but that's.
Maybe that's the origin of our.
No, that's just a social hour, which churches have too. That's nothing. We don't do anything with few exceptions. Sukkot is the big exception. There's something to do. Otherwise, we're sitting back there and reading and imagining, which in a certain sense, it's important because our God is unseen and we don't see God. We don't have an idol or an icon or anything. On the other hand, it's pretty boring. Nothing much is going on. I mean, you know, how long can you look at the cancer? I mean, it's very nice. Okay, anyhow, they do stuff. Exciting.
Yeah.
They march in with the cross.
We march around with the Torah.
Yeah, but we're supposed to be marching around with the Torah. What we're really doing is marching around the rabbi to say hello.
We just haven't.
It's supposed to be the Torah. Yes, it's supposed to be a holy moment. God is with us, but it isn't, not in our country. All right. So the parsha begins with the Kohanim, holiness of person, the priests, and especially the high priest, Aaron and his descendants. Their close contact with the sanctuary requires the priest to live with certain restrictions, that they cannot come into contact with the dead, and restrictions as to whom they may marry. Ordinary Israelites also cannot enter unless they are ritually pure. And animals offered as sacrifices may not have any physical defect. The parsha then continues with holy times. Verses that we read on the three pilgrimage festivals, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. So those passages should be quite familiar to you. Finally, towards the end of the parsha, we read about the menorah, which must be lit every day, the showbread, which must be renewed weekly. And finally, a story about a man who blasphemed in the course of a fight. I'm sure you know that the Ten Commandments appear twice in the Torah, both in the book of Exodus and the book of Deuteronomy, and that they're basically pretty much the same, with the exception of the commandment dealing with Shabbat. In Exodus, the first word of that commandment is Zachor. In Deuteronomy, the first word is Shamor. Zachor, the Shamor, B'dibur Echad. You know that from the Chadodim.
Can I make a?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just thinking that the Zachor in Exodus is because they actually didn't do much other than not gather manna on Shabbat. And when you get to Deuteronomy, just before they're gonna go into the land, then they really have to observe the Shabbos and wholeheartedly. So the fact that it's remember it in Exodus, observe it in Deuteronomy.
The tradition in the commentaries basically says Zachor refers to the positive commandments of Shabbat, what you should do, whereas Shamor refers to the negative, what you cannot do. Shamor v'Zachor. But even more important than the first word is the continuation. If you turn to page 445, Exodus 20, verse 5. Yom HaShabbat v'Kadisho. Sheshet Yamim Ta'avod ve'asita kol melachecha. V'yom HaShvi'i Shabbat l'Adonai Elohecha lo ta'aseh kol melacha אתה ובנך וביתך, עבדך ועמתך ובנתך, וגרך אשר בשעריך. So the commandment, as you know well, is that on this day, it should be a day of rest, not only for you, but for your family, for your slaves, even for your animals, behemtecha, and even for gercha, asher b'sha'arecha. The non-Jew who's living with you. Ger doesn't mean in the Torah a convert. It means someone who is not part of the people. But he or she is also entitled to rest on the Sabbath day. Because Sheshet Yamim Ata Adonai et Hashamayim et Haaretz et Hayam v'et kol asher ba'am v'yanach v'yom hashvi'i. Al ken beirach Adonai et Yom HaShabbat v'yakadeshu. So the reason that we observe Shabbat is creation. God created the world in 6 days. On the seventh day, God rested. So we should work for 6 days. And on the seventh day, imitating God, we should be resting. Now, if you turn to Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 12, on page 1219, wrong number,
10:19.
1019.
I heard you say it and I didn't even read it.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's in Parashat
I
Vayechanan.
just turned to where we were supposed to go
Yeah.
without thinking about the page.
And as you see, chapter 5, verse 12, Shamor et Yom HaShabbat lekadesho ka'asher tzivcha Adonai Elohech. As God has commanded you. Sheshet Yamim ta'avod asita kol melachtecha. Same thing. B'yom hashvi'i Shabbat l'Adonai Elohecha. Lo ta'aseh kol malacha, and then it goes, ata u'mincha u'techa, avdecha v'amacha, v'shorcha. Here it's a little different, it just says the but of course, in Exodus, it says, ve'emtecha, v'chamorcha, so. V'chol ve'emtecha, specifies, doesn't, it's not significant. Ve'gercha asher b'sharecha. Again, the ger, the stranger. Lema'an yanuach avdecha ve'amatecha kamocha. So that your slave, male and female, may rest like you do. And the reason? V'zacharta ki eved hayita be'eretz Mitzrayim. You should remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt by Yotziacha Adonai Elohecha Misham, and that the Lord your God brought you out from there with a strong hand and outstretched arm. Al Cain. That's the reason that God has commanded us to observe Shabbat. So it's not creation in Deuteronomy. The reason is Exodus. So we have creation and we have redemption. God saved us from slavery. What are we missing? Okay, go ahead.
So these restrictions don't apply if you hire somebody to work on Shabbat. Not on a non-Israelite, non-Jew, presumably.
I guess you could argue that, yes. It's, I'm sure many people would not want anybody to do work.
Yeah, healthcare.
But technically, they're not commanded, and they're not your slave.
Yeah.
But technically, you can't hire somebody.
No, I
You can
know.
hire them to do a job and they happen to. do
Yeah,
it.
it happens to do that.
right.
Which is kind of interesting, because we got, I don't know how many people working in the kitchen today.
Well, even that in my neighborhood, they would say doesn't look good.
Yeah,
Married item.
Exactly. So on the other hand, I've had a lot of people, non-Jews, who do various kinds of work. I've even asked me, one of them said, I know, he says to me, I know in your neighborhood, you don't want grass cut on Saturday. I said, yeah, you don't really, you really shouldn't be working here on Saturday. He says, well, I have to keep a really tough schedule. What if I do some work in the garden beds? What if I trim some bushes? Do you mind? I said, you're making your own schedule, so I don't mind. I'm not telling you to do it. But that was his point was, he who doesn't have this particular restriction has a very tight calendar and a lot of customers. So.
It can be a little rough. The rabbi, I think, is paid. Yeah.
Right.
My father, Allah Shalom, thought the rabbi worked 20 minutes a week. He wanted to know when I was gonna get an honest job.
Your father-in-law?
My father,
Oh, your
my
father.
father was very proud.
When I was,
He would introduce Gene and me to other people. He would say, this is my son-in-law, the rabbi. That's my daughter.
oh my. When I was president of the shul, one of the things I had to do was run that kind of interference, so to speak, because some people who didn't come very frequently to shul didn't get the idea that there were 5 funerals this week and other things to prepare for, would say, I sent an email to the rabbi yesterday and he hasn't answered. What's going on?
Yeah.
So I would say, well, there are 5 funerals this week.
24/7.
I think,
And we expect him in the office all the time when I call. I don't want voicemail. I want to talk to the rabbi when I need him. I remember Years ago, Rabbi Goodblock, Lava Shalom, who was the assistant rabbi over in Mayfield. And he told me once that somebody called him at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
How many Jews are there in Alaska?
What?
Party and they're talking about, I don't know, the population of Alaska. How many Jews are there in Alaska at 2 o'clock in the morning? The rabbi, 24/7. I mean,
The same number that were there at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Was he a member?
then I don't know.
Sometimes they're not even.
Oh, yeah, they don't, no, but you know the joke about the guy goes into the shul and says, donut. And he's, where's your ticket? I don't have a ticket. What? Well, I have to go in there, my cousin is in there and I have to tell him something. Don't let me catch you.
30 plus halacha, when were they decided upon? Was there a universal agreement as to what's permitted and what's not permitted?
The halachot of Shabbat that are forbidden are based on the building of the Mishkan. Because another time when we're commanded to Shabbat is at the end of Shemot, at the end of Exodus, in the building of the Mishkan, all of a sudden you got this keep Shabbat. And so the rabbis learned, what is melacha? What does it mean to work? If I lift this, is that work? After all, I'm expending energy. Is that work?
If you do it that many times, you're exercising, and then it is work.
No, not it's not work. But it's
As they
exercise.
say,
Anyhow, so they define it based on that, and there's,
Have there been disagreements?
come on, we have a 2,000 year tradition of, Sheilot Tshuvot, responsa.
Yeah.
I really never learned any of that stuff at the seminary, but I'm learning it now with Rabbi Brand, some of you know him, who is a brilliant, tremendous source of knowledge. And we're studying Tshuvot. Unbelievable, unbelievable. It's a whole world. Every time we study, there are new rabbis. We have a tremendous tradition of not only Ashkenazic, but of Sephardic and Yemenite and of great thinkers who have answered these kinds of questions. And they're quoted. I mean, it's like a legal brief.
right,
They're quoted, and whatever the question is then decided by the posek who's writing this responsum, based on these things, and you know, he agrees with this one, no, this one, yes, okay. And why does he agree with it? Because this one agrees with it, and this one agrees with it, and this one, well, how come he didn't read that?
We have the kidney up. I mean, that's something that we're.
Well, the Kitniot apparently, according to the research of Rabbi Galinkin in Jerusalem, the whole thing's based on misunderstanding.
yeah.
So
Nevertheless,
That's
if you
why
try
the
to find very much of it at the
conservative
Grove.
now allows eating Kitniot. We haven't done it yet in our family, but I remember in Argentina, I was invited to the home of the president of the Seminario, whose wife was Sephardic, and rice was served. That was the only time I ate rice. That's not, but
When we decided we liked Rabbi Galinkin's position, we were able to get rice 1 year, and then by the next year, the VOD had shut it down. There is
No,
one shelf of Kitniot at the Grove that only basically has snacks. And it's got a big sign on it as if anybody would go near it.
They do separate.
well, it's
Very
a
important
Rabbi, would you say that this is where this kind of misunderstanding with the Christians comes? Because one criticism they often seem to have is that the Jews are obsessed with worrying about, you know, how big is an olive's worth, you know, kazayit, et cetera, and so forth, and that they think is the wrong way to look at it. Whereas maybe our answer would be, we care enough to worry about how much is enough.
There's a whole tradition of canon law, not any different, really.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not familiar with it, but that's a big deal with the Catholic.
Right.
So I don't think it's that. What I do think it is Paul's emphasis on faith as opposed to action. I think it goes back to that quote, Judaism is concerned about your deeds, but God doesn't care. If you believe, that's all it counts. I think that's the word.
Mm.
But as you, I hope, know, that is not what Judaism is all about. And I haven't read it yet, but I saw that Rabbi Shai Held has just published a book arguing that the whole basis of Judaism is love. So arguing, of course, against
Yeah.
Ve'ahavta. Well, what do we say? Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha.
Mhm.
What did Rabbi Akiva say? The whole Torah is based on Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Okay, that's, when you boil it all down, that's what Judaism is about.
If you want to read the book, if you read the first 40 pages, it's a summary of the rest of the book. And it's enough to give you, so that you can answer anybody who says, we're not about love and we're not about chesed, doing good deeds. It answers all those arguments. All you have to do is read 40 pages, the first 40.
Thank you for that advice. Saves me a lot of time. Yeah.
Decision that
Oh.
prophecy was closed at a certain point in time. How and when did that come about? Are there not modern day prophets who have good visions about the decades to come?
That was a decision that the rabbis made. They picked a date. They were mistaken a little bit, but that's okay. Basically, when Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire, that was it. Malachi was the last prophet. No more prophecy. From then on, prophecy was given into the hands of children and fools. That's what
I think what you just said was that the rabbis decided there won't be any more prophets because they wanted to be the prophets.
No, they're not the
They're
prophets.
not prophets. They
Well,
wanted to have control.
There's a big difference between, and they emphasize this over and over again, between the written law and the oral. Between Torah shebichtav, which is what God gave us, and the interpretations of this, which is what the rabbis did. If somebody comes up and says on the pulpit, God said to me last night, I've had occasion to take people to the hospital for psychiatric care who did that, okay? I remember when I studied in Jerusalem the first time, a man from Texas came in saying that he was King David.
He was what?
King David. I went to the council in Jerusalem and warned them that there's the Shugana walking around Jerusalem, just he gets into trouble. I once was invited somewhere, I forget, somewhere in Pennsylvania, I think, to a panel of a priest and a Protestant minister meet where is prophecy today? And of course, I was first. It's always the Jew, the Catholic, the Protestant. The order goes. That way. The Jew gets first bit. So I said, in Judaism, we don't have any prophets. The prophecy ended. There's a big difference between saying that is my understanding of God's word and saying this is God's word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It brings it down
Yeah.
to a human level.
Yeah.
Every tradition has to say, that's it, this is our text. Otherwise, you don't have a tradition. The New Testament, who decided? That's it. No more gospels, no more letters, this is it, that's the New Testament. Same thing. In Islam, Quran, period. That's it. You say that God spoke to you or Gabriel spoke to you like Muhammad said? From then on, we have the Hadith. What are the Hadith? Hadith are traditions passed down from the time of Muhammad, what he said or what he did. Just like our oral Torah. It's the same thing. And they use it the same way when they decide on issues, whether they be practical or theological. They rely on the Hadith, but that's something else. That's not God. That's Muhammad, and it's passed down. Like we have, Rabbi so-and-so said in the name of Rabbi so-and-so, in the name of Rabbi so-and-so. In contrast to us, they are very concerned about the chain of tradition. I was privileged to study in a two-student seminar, reading medieval Arabic texts with an Arab. So what did the professor do? All I had to do was understand the text, which was not easy. Arabic is a very rich language. And you look up a word and you have about 10 different definitions, always something with a camel. And we would read a text, and eventually I learned a couple words, and I wouldn't have to look up every word in the dictionary. Then we take another text with another subject. The same word appears. You know that word? Be something else here.
Yeah.
It's a very rich language. Anyhow, what my fellow student had to do was to examine the chain of tradition, on which there are big books like the Talmud, telling you all about all of the various people who are quoted, where they lived, who their teachers were, who their students were. And if you can't connect them to who they say they're quoting, that hadith is invalid. And that's a big, big part of Islamic tradition and Islamic learning. That's what they do. We're not so concerned about, but they are very, very much concerned. And that is what establishes the validity of the hadith, if you have a strong chain of tradition. And are there disputes? Yes. Big books. So it was a very interesting. I never had to do that, thank God, because I would never be able to. Yes.
Rabbi, can you explain what you're saying in relation to the Aleinu? Is that referring to a singular voice or multiple cultures all recognizing a universal God? What is the vision in the Aleinu?
The Aleinu vision is messianic, the second paragraph. We'll come to that in a minute. So, in Kiddush on Friday night, we say Zichron L'Maaseh Bereshit, and we say Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim.
Oh, excellent.
Right? So, in the Kiddush already, we are mentioning both Ten Commandments, both reasons, creation and the Exodus. Now let's look at how Shabbat is described in our portion, chapter 23 of Leviticus. There's some books over there. On page, maybe this one, 724. This one I got right? Okay. 724. Chapter 23, verse 1. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta lehem moadei Adonai asher tikre'u otam mikra e kodesh. Elehe moadei. The moadei translated my fixed times. Moed, of course, is moadim l'simcha. What's that? That is a greeting for the Chagim, for the holiday. Moadim l'simcha, Chagim l'zmanim l'savdot. When you want to sell Chag Sameach, another way of saying it is, more sophisticated way, is to say Moadim l'simcha, rather than just Chag Sameach. Moadim l'simcha. The response is, Chagim l'zmanim l'savdot. So I can tell you, I was just telling the other day something. When Jean and I were dating, I was home for the Passover holiday and I sent her a card and I said, Moadim l'simcha. And she sent me a card back, Chagim l'zmanim l'savdot. So I said to this person, I said, that was it. Anymore. Anyhow, so Moadim. Then it goes on to say, Sheshet Yamim Ta'aseh Melacha Vayom HaShvi'i Shabbat Shabbaton Mikra Kodesh Kol Melacha Lo Ta'asu Shabbat. Is Shabbat a Moed?
Yes. Yeah,
Apparently it is here.
Yes.
it's every 7 days, sure, it's Moed.
No, but it says Asher Tikre'u Otam. Who sets the calendar?
Man,
Right? The rabbis set it in those days by the moon. The moon has 29 and a half days to the new moon. So on the 29th night, people would be looking, is there a new moon? And if they were in Jerusalem and came in time, and two people who were not related could testify, saw a new moon, then the rabbis would say, 29 days, this month is over, it's now Rosh Chodesh. And if they didn't see it, 30 days. It's not Rosh Chodesh, the next day is gonna be Rosh Chodesh. Then, of course, in the 5th century of the Common Era, the calendar was set. Okay, but who set it? Not God. Who determined Shabbat? It's determined, it's creation. Who created? God created. Who rested on Shabbat? God rested on
all
Shabbat.
right, well, going back to the very first time that man is told to rest on Shabbat, how did they know which day was Shabbat?
I wasn't around. I don't know.
I mean, somewhere, somebody said, well, it must be this day. Because they weren't keeping track all the way from Adam to Moshe.
Although it kind of
I don't.
assumes that they were, but yeah, your point is,
I
So
don't,
even man decided which day was the 7th day. That's what I'm saying.
It makes an argument for having the other civilizations, because they had days, so obviously they must have heard of
I
it.
think they did keep track. But I wasn't around, so I don't know.
You sure?
The calendar, so Asher Tikre'u Otam, the calendar is your responsibility. You shall proclaim. You set the calendar. The holiday is on the 15th of the month. You decide when the 15th of the month is, but that's not Shabbat. Notice that in the 3rd verse, Shabbat is called Mikra Kodesh. Mikra Kodesh,
Mm-hmm.
a sacred occasion, translated. Mikra Kodesh, the root of Mikra, of course, is the same root as the name of our book here, Vayikra, to call, to name.
It's called holy.
Holy. So normally the term Moed means an appointed time with a fixed date on the calendar. And Mikra Kodesh means either a sacred assembly when the people gathered at the central sanctuary, or a day made holy by proclamation, Mikra. It's the court's determination of the calendar. But Shabbat is not one of these days. It is not fixed on the calendar by the date, and was not a time of national assembly. Shabbat was made holy by God at creation. Rabbi Sachs, Zichrono Livracha, suggests that the terms Mikra Kodesh and Moed here have an extra sense, that they mean something else here. He suggests that Mikra Kodesh refers back to Vayikra el Moshe Vaydaber Hashem Elav Me'ohel Moed. In other words, the first verse of Leviticus. The focus is on Mikra, calling, and Moed, meeting. The Torah here with Exodus is using these words uniquely in this chapter to apply both to Shabbat and the festivals, focusing on the meeting between God and us in the arena of time. Whether God initiates the meeting on Shabbat, or we set the calendar and determine when is the festival, holy time becomes a, as he calls it, a lover's rendezvous, when Creator and creation make time for one another. This is an element of Shabbat that is not mentioned in either version of the Ten Commandments. Recalling Friday night Kiddush between Zikaron L'Maaseh L'Breshit and Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, what are the words? Ki Yom Techila L'Mikra Kodesh. That's here. Lev Shalem translates that, for it is the first of the sacred times. Adding this understanding of Shabbat, Rabbi Sachs writes, we see in the two sets of Ten Commandments and this passage in Vayikra, the three primary voices of the Bible: kingship, priesthood, and prophecy. Each has its own way of thinking and of speaking. Kings use the language of chokhmah, of wisdom, the ability to see God in creation. Chokhmah is also kind of thinking in terms of Maimonides. Maimonides was very anxious that Jews not spend all their time studying Talmud. That's why he wrote the Mishnah Torah. So you don't have to go through the Talmud. You get the law right there. And that's the only book he wrote in Hebrew. Even his commentary to the Mishnah is in Arabic. He wrote it in Hebrew because he says, as he writes it in the introduction, if you have the written Torah and my Mishnah Torah, you can now see God in creation, study physics, study the world, be amazed at the complexity and the beauty of the world that God created, and you will you will come to a level of understanding that he wanted people to do. He didn't want to spend time studying Talmud. By the way, he lost out. The only community that used the Mishnah Torah as the authority were the Yemenites.
Ah,
No other community.
ah.
Yemenites. There is a special relationship between Maimonides and the Yemenites. And so they followed the Mishnah Torah, but Ashkenazim followed the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserles, who, when the Shulchan Aruch reached him in Poland, wrote a terrible critique because he said, we don't do this, we do this. So the Ashkenazim follow Rabbi Isserles, and the Sephardim follow Yosef Karo, who wrote the Shulchan Aruch. Anyhow, Chokhmah refers to the science and the humanity, all that examines the universe as a creation of God and examines the human being as the image of God. Torah was the revelation which the priests focused on, hearing the commanding voice of God. And God said, and God spoke, and God commanded. Revelation is listening, not seeing, but listening in a deep sense of hearing and heeding. Shema, lishmoa. Wisdom tells us how things are. Revelation tells us how we should live. The third, the prophets are always focused on redemption, the long and winding road toward a society based on justice and compassion, love and forgiveness, peace and human dignity. The prophet knows where we've come from, but also envisions where we should be going. Creation, revelation, and redemption represent the three basic relationships within which Judaism sets human life. Creation is God's relationship with the world. Revelation is God's relationship with the Jewish people. And when we, the Jewish people, teach the world the values that we live, first we have to live the values. Then we can teach the world. Then we will achieve God's goal, which is redemption. Now we can appreciate why the Torah has three distinct approaches to Shabbat. The commandment in Exodus clearly is focused on creation. In Deuteronomy, it's focused on the Exodus, redemption. And here in this portion, spoken in the priestly voice, we see revelation. The book of Leviticus, also known as Sefer Torat Kohanim, begins with the word Vayikra. And here Shabbat is included, Mikra'e Kodesh. On the day of rest, in the silence of the soul, we hear the call of God. Usually, we translate Moed as an appointed time. But here, Rabbi Sachs suggests it means a meeting. The Hebrew word va'ad, which is from that same root, Moed, is a committee. Va'ad, a committee where people meet. So Moed here, in contrast to elsewhere, has this special meaning of meeting people, our people meeting God. Yehuda Levi, the great 11th century Spanish poet and philosopher, wrote that on Shabbat, it's as if God has personally invited us to be God's guest at God's table, celebrating not the creation, the longed for redemption, the creation of the world, not the creation of the world, nor the future redemption, but rather the present moment of meeting with God. Shabbat is holy because we concentrate all of our senses and all of our actions on meeting with God. If we look at the prayer book, we see that on Erev Shabbat, we are commemorating creation. Vayechulu hashamayim v'haaretz. We even quote from Exodus. And God's work on the 6 days was over, and he rested on the 7th day. Now, Shabbat morning, Yismach Moshe b'matnat chelko. That's the beginning of the Shacharit Amidah. Moses was happy because God gave him a gift. What was the gift? The Torah. The Omdal Lefanecha al Har Sinai, when he stood before you on Mount Sinai. And at Mincha this afternoon, what will we say? Ata echad v'shimcha echad. You are one, and your name is one. What do we say in the Aleinu? L'ne'emar v'haya Adonai
Melech al kol haaretz, Hayom hahu, Hayom.
Oh, this is the Shabo.
And your name?
And this is what we say in Mincha. So Friday night, we're looking at creation. Shabbat morning, we're looking at Revelation, and we're reading the Torah. And on Shabbat at Mincha, we're looking to the future. And consider the 3 blessings surrounding the Shema. In the morning and the evening. The first one, there's 4 on the evening, but in the morning, there are only 3.
Right.
And I'm talking about the first 3. The first one talks about creation. In the morning, we say Yotzer Or. In the evening, Ma'ariv Aravim. Golel Or Mipnei Choshech. V'Choshech Mipnei Or. We're talking about creation. The second bracha, Ahava Rabbah Avdan. Or Ahavat Olam. What is it talking about? God loves us. What's the sign of the love? He gave us a gift.
Torah.
What is that? The Torah. And the third one, Mi chamocha va'elim Adonai. That's redemption. Every morning and every evening, we are marking those 3 major elements of Jewish belief. God created the world. God revealed God's will to us in the Torah, and we have the responsibility, with God's help, to make the world the way God wants it to be. Creation, revelation, redemption. What in the secular world is fragmented into science, religion, political ideology, we unite in the observance of Shabbat, where we connect the God who created the universe, who provided us in the Torah the path to a meaningful life and a vision of a society and a world of peace and justice for which we all must strive. And finally, we commemorate the promise that we can reach that goal of redemption.
What, Rabbi, what about this prayer we say daily, although it's the own, what if God will send a redeemer? Is that A imply singularity? Or does that A imply an age? What does that prayer
The
imply?
Bible and other ancient texts, rather than speaking, Oriental texts, rather than speaking as the Greeks did in philosophical language, speaks in personal language. So the world, so Adam, the Messiah, these are all individuals. But today, and under Greek influence for many, many centuries, we think of these as kind of a metaphor. So the metaphor, of course, is that there's going to be some guy riding on a donkey coming in, and that'll be. But I think it makes much more sense for us to think like the Greeks thought, because that's the way already the rabbis were tremendously influenced by Greek thinking. That's why Judaism is really a Hellenistic religion. Not the Bible. If we had continued and not been influenced by the Greeks, I think we would have died. As the Babylonian civilization and the Egyptian civilization died, we would have died. But the destruction of the temple and the meeting with the Greek way of understanding the world gave us what we today know as Judaism. Yeah.
The text that describe in specific terms the role that Elijah will have as being the forerunner of to announce the Messianic era. We greet him at the end of the Passover Seder.
Yeah, absolutely. We greet him not only then, but at the bris. You know, he's all around, and in the Midrash, people meet him, and he has lots of interesting things to tell people. And there are all kinds of stories about boys going to sleep and wanting to make sure that if they're Elijah, that they hear God calling. Again, this is, if you want to take this literally, you can do it, I guess, but I think for us, thinking really in much more, if you want to say sophisticated ways, this is it's a metaphor. Our job is not to wait for Elijah. Our job is to use our tradition as a guide to how we should live, how we should treat other people, how we should look upon the choices we have to make in life. That we are guided by our tradition in making those choices so that we can bring harmony, peace, justice, love to our life and to the life of everybody. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Yeah.
So just, I'm not a Torah scholar, but for us, I think Shabbat, and for the Jewish people, that Shabbat, maybe, which we didn't talk about, I think a main thing, a benefit we get from it is it creates order in life, creates order in our lives. And to me, that's like, I mean, is it true, all of the laws and the rules and how to live life and everything, but just the fact that we have a, and just an institution in our life that, no matter if you said you lived in Jerusalem, you lived in Argentina, I've traveled the world a lot, and wherever you go, you have this pattern for your life, and so you maintains balance in our lives.
But I think it's really more than that. In that it's a day when we don't do what we're doing every other day.
Yes.
And I am not a traditional Shabbat observer, but I do value the tradition, and I love to tell the story of somebody who was walking to shul and noticed things that he had driven by for weeks, but he never saw. That's Shabbat. We're supposed to be spending the time on things that we didn't notice or we didn't pay attention to during the week. It frees us. It frees us because of all of the things you can't do. It forces you to do the things that are supposed to be done, which is connecting with family, with friends, with examining your life, examining what did I do this past week? How could I have done things better? What mistakes did I make that I don't want to make again? What can I do next week that will be more in line with what I should be doing with my life? It forces us to, because of the things you can't do, it forces us to think about the things that we don't think about during the week. We're too busy. But those are the important things.
Yeah.
You know, I have never at a funeral heard or said that they should have spent more time in the office.
Yeah.
He should have made more money. This guy, he died, poor guy. Should have made more money, didn't spend enough time earning money. I haven't heard that yet. Yeah, I've heard about he should have spent more time with his family. Or you would say about him, the most important thing you see in his obituaries, the most important thing was his family. Well, I don't know. Let's hope it was so. But I think, on the deathbed, people, or if you have a cancer diagnosis or something, you can reevaluate. We're supposed to be reevaluating every Shabbat. We're supposed to be looking back at the previous week and at the next week and what can I do better?
Yeah.
What's really important? What's important in my life and in the life of those I care about? How can I do those things better? So it is, yes, it gives you order, but it's more than it forces you to focus on what's really important.
Yeah.
And it isn't making a living or fixing up this or making your name.
Yeah.
That's how. Well, have a wonderful Shabbat.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.